Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota and Lakewood Ranch. I'm Catherine Bonner, the Director of Religious Education, and today, happy to be the worship associate for our guest speaker, Reverend Brock Leach. I encourage you to go to our website at www.uucsarasota.com. You'll see there that we are a vibrant church with a lot of things going on right now. Look for all the various Zoom meetings, especially our new holiday Zoom meetings that we will be having, including a holiday poetry reading and a holiday sing-along. But to join the Zoom meetings, you'll need to sign up and be getting our newsletter. There is also a place on the website to sign up. And don't forget to hit the donate button. Your support is vital to keep the activities of our church going strong. Now our opening words are from Reverend Fulgence Nagijimana. He is the founder of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Burundi. When strangers meet, endless possibilities emerge. New experiences, new ways of understanding, and new ways of taking action. When strangers meet, each pays special attention to the other. Each is called to serve something larger than themselves. So today, this morning, let's light the chalice. We light the chalice today for openness, for willingness to grow, for rich curiosity, and for a common purpose. Let us now listen to and enjoy our song, We Are.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage.
What a beautiful song we just heard. Now we will be centering today, first with words, then with a brief moment of silence, and finally in song, Spirit of Life. Our centering words today are by Howard Thurman, the theologian and spiritual mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. These are words from the Search of Common Ground. There is a spirit in us and in the world, working always against the thing that destroys and lays waste. Always, we must know that the contradictions of life are not final or ultimate. We must distinguish between failure and many-sided awareness so that we will not mistake conformity for harmony, uniformity for synthesis. We will know that for all of us, to be alike is the death of life in us, and yet perceive the harmony that transcends all diversities and in which diversity finds its richness and significance. Now a moment of silence.
Good morning. I hope it's been a great Thanksgiving for you and you've been able to connect with all those you love, either virtually or in person. Now, if this had been a normal Thanksgiving, you might have had a chance to practice being in conversation with people from different cultures right around your holiday dinner table, like your brother-in-law or your youngest daughter. Depending on your family dynamics, you may have tested your ability to stay in relationship with someone you care about despite your differences of opinion. But for most of us, that annual rite will have to wait until a more propitious time. Yet it's hard to imagine a time when those conversations were more needed. I have to confess that I cannot wrap my mind around how 70 million Americans voted for a guy who fails every test of character and ability and fundamental morality that I care about. But because I ultimately place my faith in the goodness of people, collectively, over the long haul, I can't bring myself to believe that tens of millions of Americans are irretrievably ignorant or immoral. I believe they're misguided, but there has to be more about their situation that I just don't understand. At a minimum, a whole lot of people are making choices on needs and priorities very different from my own. And probably like most of you, I can't shake the idea that we're facing existential crises like spiraling economic injustice and climate change, things that demand global consensus and systems change, at the very moment that we're living in the most divisive political climate of my lifetime. And it's not even divisiveness about policies. It's divisiveness about what constitutes reality or morality. So where do we begin? If we care about future generations, and we all do, I don't see that we have any alternative but to learn how we can live together creatively and collaboratively in a multicultural world. And I think we have to start by demonstrating to ourselves that it's possible. You know, the task in front of us is fundamentally a theological one, meaning that it's about developing a common understanding of how the world actually works, and therefore what really matters. It means coming to some agreement about what is real and moral, and who in the theological landscape is better positioned to help do that than we are. If you think about our 7 principles, the arc that extends from inherent worth and dignity to the vision of world community and our fundamental interdependence, they express a Unitarian Universalist theology that is crystal clear about how the world works and what matters. The world works through us. All of us matter. And we're all in this together. What ultimately matters is the love that binds us in families and communities and countless human associations that makes the future possible. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And our purpose is to be the weavers, continuously repairing broken threads and adding entirely new ones in the service of human flourishing and more abundant life on the planet. In short, our theology compels us to help bring about what Dr. King called the beloved community. And that includes all of humanity. This is a huge theological ambition. And I harbor no illusion that we're going to convert everyone to Unitarian Universalism. But as in our best moments throughout history, we can help show how it's done. And we can be an influential catalyst. The big catch is that we can't do this from our current position as a predominantly white, well-educated, professional class faith. We are called by this moment and our own history to be more. 4 years ago, I took on a consulting role for the Unitarian Universalist Association, focused on better supporting religious innovators who are developing new forms of community that meets the needs of people who are underserved in our typical congregations. They might be people of color, or young adults, or families with young children, or people in blue-collar working communities. They're people who might identify with our history and our values, but not with our particular way of doing church. If they're African American, they might wish for a more lively, evocative, and warm vision of Unitarian Universalism that makes room for praise and gratitude, as well as the blues. If they're young adults, they might want more interactive ways of growing spiritually and doing shared justice work. If they're families with young children, they might need a different model that engages them as a whole family in learning and finding meaning together. And our major assumption is that the best ideas are going to be created by people from those underserved communities themselves, because they're the ones who most acutely understand what's missing, and they're motivated to do something about it. Fortunately, there are folks in all these groups who are actually figuring it out. We've been supporting them with courses and webinars and mentoring, and this summer we launched the UU Religious Innovators Network. You can check it out at uuinnovators.org. It provides practical spiritual and moral support to people doing this work. And the good news is that we have over 200 innovators enrolled in the network. About half of them are doing startups of one kind or another, and about half are leading innovations in congregations. There are many ideas in the works at various stages, and there may be a dozen or so that are proving to be viable. But along the way, I began to realize that once we have proven ideas that meet the needs of people who have been underserved, then we have to figure out how are we going to replicate those ideas in communities across the country. Duh. And since our congregations determine their own destinies and hold the vast majorities of our resources in our movement, the only way that could happen is if individual congregations decided to host or sponsor these ideas locally under their own umbrellas. Frankly, we don't have a lot of history of doing that. As democratic, self-governing organizations, our congregations naturally tend to focus on meeting the needs of the people who are present. As it happens, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUU, B-L-U-U, a national community for UUs of African descent, has spent the last several years developing a form of UU community that's deeply grounded in our shared theology and attracting Black UUs from across the continent. There are now developed local in-person versions of that community called Blue Harbors and small group ministries called Blue Havens. And they're about to invite UU congregations around the country to host these communities, physically and financially. You know, personally, I think this is an exciting opportunity, and I think it's coming at exactly the right time. It won't make sense for every congregation to do this, but it will for some. More importantly, it challenges all of us to take a leap forward in helping to bring about the beloved community. And we have successfully extended the reach of Unitarian Universalism in the past. The most successful effort was the fellowship movement that started in the late 40s and concluded in the early 60s. In that period, the denomination provided basic support for starting a fellowship in your living room. It included some guidance on how to advertise, worship resources, and if you got to a certain size, they'd help fund a minister. The result was that Unitarianism spread across the middle of the country and further west and south to hundreds of communities that were not previously served, including college towns across the land. Our own congregation was the product of the fellowship movement. In total, over 700 new congregations were launched, and of those, 353 remain today. They have the same size mix as the rest of our congregations, ranging from small to mid-size to large churches like this one. And they account for almost a third of our total UUA membership. I'd call the fellowship movement a success by any standard. So the question this raises is, what would it look like if we were to launch a new communities movement today? One that, instead of being focused on underserved locations, was focused on underserved people in our current locations. What if it focused on meeting the needs of people from different backgrounds and cultures and life stages? It would certainly be more challenging. At a practical level, most of the fellowships were started by people who were already UUs for somewhere else and from somewhere else, who wanted to bring their faith to the new communities where they'd relocated. Having done that, they found they could also attract people who had never heard of Unitarian Universalism. In this case, we'd need to first prove forms that work for people in different groups that are underserved, and that's starting to happen. Then they'd need to be launched and led locally by people from those groups. And here's the big one. The host congregations would need to take some risks and invest in programs specifically designed to serve people different from themselves. Is that possible? If it were, what obstacles would congregations have to overcome? What supports could we provide that would help them decide to host those new forms of community? I began to realize that answering these questions was going to take some serious research. So a year and a half ago, I enrolled myself in a Doctor of Ministry program at Boston University's School of Theology. I wanted to get some support for the kind of ethnographic research that I think we need to do. I'm 6 courses into the program. It's been terrific. By the end of January, I'll have my research proposal ready for approval. But as a first step, I began wondering, what could we learn from the multicultural congregations that already exist in our movement? How did they become multicultural in the first place? What challenges them? What sustains them? What's it like to minister to them? So over the last couple of months, I've conducted in-depth interviews with 6 ministers of multicultural congregations, defined in this case as having significant number of members who are Black or people of color. They usually have significant age, LGBTQ, and economic diversity as well. It's been inspiring to talk to these ministers. And I've heard 4 surprisingly consistent themes. I want to share them with you this morning because they tell us something about how to live together in a multicultural world. Since the interviews were confidential, I can't share the identities of the ministers I interviewed or their congregations, but I can share some of their stories. First of all, these congregations became multicultural by intention. It didn't happen randomly or without a conscious effort. They all felt called to help demonstrate what it means to actually be a beloved community and to create the conditions in which that could happen. In some cases, the intention began decades ago. In others, it was more recent. For all of them, it was a journey of continuous experimentation and learning supported by a lot of conviction, not a single act. Second, and related, they all saw themselves serving the larger communities in which they were located. This arose from their belief that our theology calls us to serve more than our own membership. The diversity they enjoy was actually a byproduct of engaging their large communities in multiple ways, through spiritual grounding and community building and justice seeking. As one minister described it, these congregations are deeply outwardly missional. And they're known locally for their work. Some of them are large, but there are small ones too. One of the ministers I interviewed told of how she was recruited by a declining congregation in a blue-collar New England town that had been ravaged by job losses over the decades. The church was down to 12 aging members, but it had a 30,000 square foot building located on the town green and an endowment of a little over $1 million. She told them she'd take the job if they agreed to some specific conditions and gave them a list of 20. The first and most important condition was agreeing that they would serve the larger community in which they were located. She reassured them that there would always be room for the current members, but she believed that they could leave a lasting legacy if they agreed to serve the people all around them. She started out by doing some community organizing, talking to everyone in the town about community needs, and then volunteering the church as a place to go on to do that work, whether you were a member or not. The short version of the story is that 7 years later, the congregation has grown to 100 members. It attracts working families of all races. It is the center of community life for the whole town. the place where the Easter egg hunt and Christmas tree decorating contests take place, and the animals are blessed. It's the place where people down on their luck get the help they need. It's a place where low-income working parents are discovering their own leadership and agency because they're the ones devising and leading these programs. The church has helped restore community pride. This is the same Unitarian Universalist theology that you and I love, made real in the lives of people who know nothing about it beforehand and have embraced it. Her congregation is strikingly different from the white, well-educated, professional UU stereotype. The third common theme was interesting to me. While these multicultural congregations actively support programs that meet the needs of people from different cultures and races and life stages, they also focus on building a community of the whole, where people identify with the congregation and Unitarian Universalism as a whole, not just their own group. In several cases, that started by planting an offshoot community designed to meet the needs of Latino or African American people living in different neighborhoods. These were developed and led by people from those communities. But over time, both the original church and the offshoot have grown more diverse as members identify with Unitarian Universalism as a whole and value the diversity they share. One minister told me about a large group of African Americans in her church that meet once a month. They provide a vibrant ministry to one another. But the whole church always worships and celebrates and mourns together. They bring many different voices and styles and music and liturgies to their weekly worship services. Finally, and I think most importantly, these congregations saw their central work as encouraging their own spiritual growth and transformation. Individually, as a congregation, and as a community. They recognize their own opportunities to grow in learning how the world works through the eyes of others, recognizing and resisting systems of oppression, and being transformed by genuine diversity. The ministers in these congregations saw this spiritual growth as the central work in their ministries. One minister of a very diverse congregation told a story about a heated meeting in which someone opposed creating gender-neutral bathrooms because, quote, "We don't have people like that here." She says they actually do have members who identify as transgender and non-binary. But for her, that was beside the point. Wouldn't we want to have restrooms for transgender people if they came? But her approach was to receive these statements with awe. She responded with statements like, "That's amazing what you said. Let me make sure I understand it. And let's just sit with that for a minute." As a way of separating the person from their opinion. And after the fight or flight impulse passed, they were able to talk more thoughtfully about their differences of opinion. Her approach is not to cancel people who disagree with her, but to move toward them with curiosity, getting to know their better qualities and talking with them about how they can stay in relationship and still disagree. She says that takes a lot of pastoral energy. But it's the central work we all have to do in building multicultural communities. So these particular congregations are all multicultural by intention, as a direct expression of our UU theology. They understand themselves to be serving the larger communities in which they're located. They work hard to meet the differing needs of diverse members while building a community of the whole. And they set out to support their members in their own spiritual growth and transformation, moving toward each other and staying in relationship in order to learn from one another. I share these themes this morning not because I think becoming multicultural is necessarily the right goal for every congregation. That depends on their unique needs and the varying circumstances in their communities. During this interim period, we're going to have a chance to talk together about whether or not a goal like that makes sense for our church. But I share them because what I learned from these ministers gives me hope. Their congregations are demonstrating that it is possible to build thriving multicultural communities. Beyond that, they're showing us how to begin healing the divisions we're experiencing around our own family dinner tables during the holidays and in our own communities. Listening to them made me wonder, what if I challenged myself to build a multicultural life? What if I got clear about what our UU theology calls me to do? What if I identified the ways in which I might best serve our larger community as I'm able? What if I set out to understand the needs of someone culturally different from myself? I'm thinking about the Trump voters. And then found some common ground for being in community with them? And what if I opened myself up to growing and being transformed by what I learn? This is a time when our faith matters greatly, not only to us, but to all of those around us. And we can begin to show how it's done. As Reverend Fulgence, founder of the UU Church of Burundi, said, when strangers meet, endless possibilities emerge. Each pays special attention to the other. Each is called to serve something larger than the self. Let's move together toward openness, a willingness to grow in rich curiosity and common purpose. Now, please join in singing hymn number 1074, which you can follow along if you have the teal hymnal at home, or you can join us in singing the words on the screen. Let's turn the world around.
Oh
Now, as we conclude our time together, we extinguish the chalice with these words from Reverend Barbara Hamilton Hallway. Go now in peace, deeply regard each other, truly listen to each other, speak what each must speak. Be ready in every moment to disarm your own heart. Rejoice in this love you have begun. Amen.